calls it a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matt Moreno. Matt, it's Sunday. It's the last full-length live show of the year because we've got all these holidays landing on Saturdays and Sundays for the next couple of weeks. I've got my Christmas sweater on. It's Oregon Ducks. It's the best I could do. How are we feeling over there?
Not too bad. I think it's been an interesting week. I guess on one hand, I'm thankful that we have plenty to talk about tonight. I'm curious to see what kind of reaction we're going to get from the viewers. On the other hand, it's not necessarily how I maybe would have envisioned things sort of falling. Yeah,
and as the chat is pointing out, Moreno's got a cleaned up haircut, clean shave as well. How about that Raiders game today? Can we just take 2 seconds real quick and say that was the stupidest play I've ever seen in the history of the world to end that game? The Patriots just completely falling apart. It was amazing. I hate the Patriots. I don't even know if I want the Raiders to win because of draft pick stuff, but it's always nice to beat the Patriots.
Yeah, I'll have to be 100% honest with you. I have no idea what you're talking about just because I was out getting a haircut and taking care of errands and stuff. So I got home not that long ago, had dinner, and then hopped on with you. So you'll have to fill me in after this.
Yeah, it's literally the stupidest thing that's ever happened. But enough about that. Lots to get to, as you said. I think kind of 3 headlines from the week that was: Noah Syndergaard signs with the Dodgers, J.D. Martinez signs with the Dodgers, and then as of today on Sunday, news breaks that Justin Turner is signing a 2-year deal with the Boston Red Sox. And so, Matt, I'll kind of go to you. When you look at those 3, J.D. Martinez, Noah Syndergaard, Justin Turner, where do you want to start? What's the biggest storyline from this past week for the Dodgers?
Ooh, that's tough. Let's go J.D. Martinez. I think just because it was a little unexpected, only because of how the offseason had kind of been going for the Dodgers. And I mean, I know that they've had interest in him for several years, but this wasn't necessarily a signing I saw coming for multiple reasons.
Yeah, a guy who's strictly a designated hitter, I think, is one of the biggest things that didn't make sense. The flip side is it's a guy the Dodgers have been linked to for a long time. It's a guy who kind of gives them what a lot of people thought they needed, which was an impact bat. Say what you will, he's 35, so he's a few years younger than Justin Turner, and even given like a pretty rough second half of this past season, he has on the whole been a very much above average hitter. The power is still there. I shouldn't say that. The power dipped this past year, but it feels like it would be a pretty steep decline if it just disappeared as quickly. He's got a history with the Dodgers hitting coach, Robert Von Scoyoc, as well. And so it is an interesting deal. It plays to the Dodgers' versatility because they can go and sign a pure designated hitter like Martinez, who played 0 innings in the field last year. I think only because you have guys like Max Muncy, Miguel Vargas, Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, who can kind of bounce around and play so many other positions that maybe you can get all your different lineup combinations out there, even with one guy in the DH spot. Ultimately, it becomes a J.D. Martinez over Justin Turner, who we will get to. But is that kind of what surprised you, is just the strictly designated hitter sort of piece of it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know. You know, the Dodgers have been very open about preferring to use the DH spot as a means to kind of get position players some pseudo rest because they're sort of off their legs. Was some of that just a matter of roster construction and circumstance? Yeah. Like if J.D. Martinez would have fallen into their laps 3 years ago type thing, you know, they probably would have signed him. And I think same thing, you know, I mentioned in one of, our recent videos when we were discussing the J.D. Martinez signing, the Dodgers did have interest in Nelson Cruz, and that would have sort of been in the same mold, right? Where he's pretty much going to be your set DH. All of that being said, I don't know if the 2023 season is when the Dodgers, considering the outlook of the team, I don't know if now is the right time to really lock yourself into one DH. And with J.D. Martinez, like you said, he is somebody who has been successful in that role in the past, obviously. And so if you get that production, then great. But if it's a little bit more of kind of the inconsistency, not so much power, then you're sort of stuck with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the last 2 years with J.D. Martinez, and it's kind of which of these do you think is maybe more realistic? In 2021, he has a slash line of 286 in the batting average, 349 on base, 518 slugging percentage. That's with 28 home runs. He has 92 runs, 99 RBIs. And you just look down that line, 127, weighted runs created plus, and that's a really, really good hitter. 2022, though, those numbers dip. The batting average, 274, so that's down 12 points. On base, down 8 points to 341. And then the slug, down 70 points. He goes from 28 home runs in 148 games to 16 home runs in 139 games. And so this definitely feels like, as is the case in many of the Dodgers going out and signing guys via free agency, it's guys that want to come to Los Angeles. They want to rebuild their value a little bit. And we talked about this a little bit on our show the other day, but if you look at J.D. Martinez's splits, kind of first half versus second half, his first half numbers were pretty remarkable. 302 batting average, 368 on base, 481 slugs. So that's an 850 OPS. I think the number was he had 40 extra base hits. Yeah, 9 home runs and 30 doubles in the first half of the season. Now you look at the second half of last season, and those numbers fall off. Just 7 home runs and 13 doubles, so half as many extra base hits. The batting average down to 233, the on base down to 301, the slug down to 400, the OPS down to just 701. And so part of this, and this is a theme, Matt, throughout a lot of this video that we're going to be talking about, is it's a belief in the Dodgers infrastructure. It's a belief in player development, and can they take J.D. Martinez? Because I think and improve him, get him back to where he was. Because if I read you those 2021 numbers and said this is what you're going to get for 1 year and $10 million, I think we'd all be over the moon thrilled, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a no-brainer. But again, like to look at, obviously I do think that there is something to be said for a player's track record and career history and all that, obviously, but you need to also weigh what you've seen from them most recently. And yeah, it's just interesting that, the way it ended up shaking out is the Red Sox and Dodgers have essentially traded Justin Turner and J.D. Martinez. And then when you look at those two players specifically, how the 2022 season went for them, it's an inverse, right? Justin Turner was slow to get going and then caught fire, whereas J.D. Martinez was hot early and then kind of declined. And so it's just interesting to see, that adds kind of another layer. And frankly, I mean, I'll flush it out a little bit further as we get into the next topic. But I didn't necessarily think that it had to be one or the other with Turner and Martinez, especially with what the contract figures ended up being.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone in the comments saying that the Dodgers have become like the Red Sox, Mookie Betts, now J.D. Martinez. It's actually funny because the opposite is even more true. If you look at the Red Sox roster now that Justin Turner has signed with them, they've got Justin Turner, they've got Kike Hernandez, they've got Kenley Jansen, they've got Chris Martin, recent friend alert, and who am I missing?
Verdugo.
Oh, and Alex Verdugo is the fifth. I think somebody said Connor Wong. They tried to include him. I'm not sure many Dodger fans would recognize that name. But that was the other big news on Sunday is that Justin Turner signs a 2-year, $22 million deal with the Red Sox. And by the way, it is reported in there that he's not expected to play. He's going to be primarily a designated hitter with a little bit of time at first base. So clearly teams around the league were not seeing him as a real option at third base. But I see this deal, depending on the numbers, he's making between $14 and $15 million in 2022, and then between $7 and $8 million as a player option for 2023, and then the player option is for 2024. I'll be honest, I like the J.D. Martinez contract better than this one. That's probably not going to be a popular take, but if I like the flexibility of 1 year, J.D. Martinez, $10 million, saving $4 or $5 million this year, not having to deal with the potential player option. That's just the players. Now, obviously, Justin Turner, the person, brings a lot more to the table, but you said it. You think there was a way to make Martinez and Turner work together. Walk me through that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think basically, at 2 years, $22 million for Turner, it's an $11 million AAV. Like, it's essentially the $10 million that they just gave to J.D. Martinez, right? So it's almost a wash. Like, if had Turner signed for, 30, $35 million, then I think it's a little bit more understandable that the Dodgers sort of let him walk. But I think there was a path to having both of them because, like I've mentioned before, like you've been hinting at for several months, like Gavin Lux at shortstop pretty much seems to be what's coming. So if that is the case, in my opinion, you can re-sign Turner at the number he got, even if it does have the player option, because frankly, he probably would have declined that anyway and then been a free agent, and then you figure it out at that point. But if you re-sign him, he becomes your third baseman. You move Max Muncy to second base, where I think I've expressed I think he's better off defensively than at third. And then Gavin Lux is at shortstop. And J.D. Martinez is obviously your primary designated hitter. Then the question, of course, is Miguel Vargas.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who fully believes that Miguel Vargas is ready for an everyday role in the major leagues at this point. And it's not a knock on him. It's just it's where I think he is at this point in his career.
Yeah.
So you let him sort of split time. Like if you don't want Turner starting every day at third base, you let Miguel Vargas get some starts there. I know I've brought up in the past that Vargas has also played when he was up with the Dodgers this year. He was getting a lot of pregame work at second base, so maybe he's comfortable there. He can also, spell Max Muncy, or if you want to play Vargas at second base, you move Max Muncy to third base. If you want to trust Miguel Vargas in left field, if you want to try that, you can. And so that's just kind of like, I don't think that it needed to be, one or the other. But again, honestly, I think fact of the matter is it's just a luxury tax threshold issue. I think it's plain and clear with how the Dodgers have been operating this offseason. And if you want to trace it even further back, it ties to the Trevor Bauer signing, obviously, and that whole suspension and ordeal, and then waiting on a ruling from his appeal. And this also, we could even expand it. I've sat on here before and told you I think what Tyler Anderson ended up getting from the Angels is something the Dodgers should have done. Especially, hindsight is obviously 2020 at this point with the money being thrown around. But even at the time, I felt like that was pretty reasonable. You guys need starting pitching. Why didn't you match it? Again, it's a luxury tax threshold.
Yeah, the only thing I would push back on is going back to the Vargas versus Justin Turner. If you told me, if I was the Dodgers, and again, it's not my money, we can do that whole thing, but paying Justin Turner $14 to $15 million versus giving Miguel Vargas the runway that he has. I'm not saying Miguel Vargas is going to give you the numbers that Justin Turner did, because look, Justin Turner, for being honest, he ended up being a really good player last year. 278 batting average, 350 on base, slug of 438. So we're talking about an OPS of basically 800. As you said, that OPS was like 900 the second half. I'm not telling you to pencil that in for Miguel Vargas, but I am saying, like, can Miguel Vargas get you 75% of that? Can Miguel Vargas give you a 720, 730 OPS next season? At which point, you're probably getting better defense from Miguel Vargas. You're getting a little bit more versatility. You're saving the money. All of those types of things. So that's why, to me, J.D. Martinez versus Justin Turner, it felt like they had to choose one. And again, I'll just say, for me, the player, I like J.D. Martinez, the player, better for 1 year, $10 million. But let's talk off the field. Like, you and I have talked about the clubhouse and the culture. And look, Justin Turner probably the most responsible guy, maybe outside of Dave Roberts. I know that's going to be a controversial statement that I'm sure the chat will love. But Justin Turner is kind of the heart and soul. He's kind of the guy that was the face of the franchise. Obviously, they've got strong leadership elsewhere. Clayton Kershaw, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts. You go down the line. Do you think Justin Turner, the person, is that going to have a huge impact? And maybe even, I don't want this to come across the wrong way, but is it possible that you and I have talked about, they need a change of voice maybe? Is it possible that this gives them a fresh enough start in 2023 so as things don't continue to feel stale, potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be forced, obviously, into changing of the guard, basically. Kershaw is still around. Austin Barnes, even though he's the backup catcher, he at least does have, he's been with the team for a while. I mean, suddenly he's the second longest tenured player, I believe. I'd have to double check
sounds
it.
Right. Yeah, with Cody Bellinger gone.
So there is going to be an interesting change and an interesting dynamic in the clubhouse now moving forward, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, because I do feel like Mookie Betts is more of a kind of a silent leader, like lead by example type thing, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to get up and address the locker room the way maybe a Turner might. Maybe Freddie Freeman sort of grows into that now that this will be his second year with the team. I would imagine he's more comfortable. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be something that I thought about, and I'm, like I said, curious to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be weird. Like, I never really believed that he would actually be gone. Just because it felt like the type of guy, he was still good. Like, this wasn't a guy that was looking for an extra contract when it was like, all right, dude, just hang him up. Obviously, he goes and gets $22 million. I don't blame the Dodgers for not wanting to give the second year. To your point, if he's good, he's going to decline it. The problem is, if he's bad, he's not going to decline it. He's going to say, yes, thank you very much. I'll take this $8 million and we'll figure out the rest later, which is, I think, kind of the reason you give a guy a 1 year contract and not a 2 year contract. And even if it is a 1 year deal, 14 or 15 million bucks is a pretty substantial chunk of change for a guy like Justin Turner, who was, good but not great, I would say, last season. So that's go ahead.
I will say really quick, just to leave. I mean, I think he would have been open to maybe shifting around how the 22 was sort of split among, guaranteed salary for 2023 and the player option. Like, I don't necessarily think it would have had to have been apples to apples, where if he is getting $15 million next year, that's what he absolutely needed with the Dodgers. But hey, it's water under the bridge at this point.
Yeah. Are you all in on the 2023 Red Sox, Matt? Kenley, Kike,
I think so.
your guy JT.
I will say with Kike and Turner teammates again, I think we're going to get some fun stuff on social media. It may cause some Dodger fans to, have what's that X-Men meme where they're looking in the picture frame. It'll be, I think, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to see them kind of all together again.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, look, our viewers won't necessarily watch or won't necessarily know, but Ian, our boss, he'll be happy since the Red Sox are sort of his second team.
Yeah, an East Coast guy who hates the Yankees, so and the Mets, so he's happy to jump on that bandwagon as well. Well, speaking of the Mets, how about that for a segue? The third major piece of news from this past week was the Dodgers getting some pitching help. Noah Syndergaard signing a 1-year, $13 million contract. Again, if you're not subscribed and ringing the notification bell here already, please do, because over the last few weeks, if there's been a big move, we've jumped on live and done our best to either do it right afterwards or the night of. We had a great conversation with Syndergaard. I believe that was our 4-boxer. Is that right? Did we get 4? Was that the Syndergaard move, or was that J.D. Martinez?
No, we did 4 for the shortstops.
Shortstops, that's right. Yeah, all right. My brain's not functioning right now. But Syndergaard, 1-year, $13 million deal. This is the new version of Tyler Anderson, the new version of Andrew Heaney, the new version of any other guy the Dodgers seemingly pick up off the scrap heap. How confident are you that this one's going to work out in the same way that the Heaney and Anderson ones did?
Man, that's a great question. You sort of have to be, because the Dodgers keep doing it time and time again with all sorts of different pitchers, and Syndergaard certainly has kind of the pedigree and the history and the ceiling that we've seen from him. And obviously, it's just a matter of he is coming back from Tommy John. He was coming back from Tommy John surgery. Now that he's going to be further removed from that alone, I think, is reason to be a little bit more optimistic that he could improve on what we saw this year with the Phillies and the Angels. So I think the Dodgers will definitely tap into some stuff and, work their magic, whether it's a grip or pitch usage or whatever the case may be. And he should be improved. But I think what'll be interesting to see is how this sort of pans out, because again, like you look at the $13 million a year, that's what Tyler Anderson got from the Angels, and Tyler Anderson just went through your system and you sort of knew what you're going to get with him, whereas Syndergaard is an unknown, and it's not apples to apples because obviously this is just 1 year. Yeah.
I mean, the thing with Syndergaard is a few things. He had a sub-4 ERA last year, so 3.94. So, we could sit here and talk about what that means, and I'm not saying, you put him in the Cy Young conversation. I'm just saying a 3.94 ERA is not terrible. We're talking about a guy who, as we'll get to later on in the show, he's your number 5 starter. So, if the Dodgers' number 5 starter posts an ERA under 4 next year, we should all be happy about it, okay? The second thing is, a lot of people are super concerned about the velocity dip, which is reasonable. You look at Fangraphs, his fastball velocity was 94.5, has basically been 94.5 since Tommy John surgery. So he missed all of 2020. He made just 2 appearances, 1 inning apiece in 2021, and then pretty much a full season, 25 appearances in 2022. But prior to the injury, his fastball velocity was around 98 miles an hour. It was up at 100 as far back as 2017. But 2019, we're at 97.9. So we're talking about a 3.5 mile an hour dip. That's a lot of reason. That's a reason a lot of people are concerned. Can the Dodgers get some of that back? We'll see. But I guess the point I would make is Tyler Anderson wasn't a velocity guy. Yes, Heaney had nasty stuff, and it was just a matter of can he locate it in the right place and avoid the home run ball. But Tyler Anderson was sort of a smoke and mirrors guy. He's had the funky windup. And so that's kind of the comp to me that gives me confidence. I also said on our live show, Syndergaard does one thing really, really well, and that's limit walks. I believe he was in the 98th percentile for walk rate, just 2 walks per 9 innings. So I look at all those pieces, and I'm not saying this is a guy who's going to do what Tyler Anderson did last year, but I think we'd all be happy if he posts an ERA around 3.75, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, velocity, obviously, it's great, and it's if a pitcher has it, you would prefer that. But we've heard time and time again from several hitters and managers say, if a pitcher is up there throwing 102 miles an hour, but it's straight, it's going to get timed up and hit. So whatever Syndergaard sort of may have lost with velocity, if he can make up for it with spin rate, which obviously affects, how you're perceiving how fast the pitch may be coming and stuff like that, and just different usage and things, it could end up working out. And I agree. I mean, I don't think they're too high of expectations on him. He's not coming in needing to be the ace of the staff, like you just alluded to.
Yeah.
I think the only sort of pressure, and it's more on the Dodgers as a whole and a bigger conversation, is just he needs to stay healthy, because they don't necessarily, at least I don't believe, they don't have like the proven kind of experience depth and throughout the pitching staff that they've had in years past.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Again, we just talked about 24 starts last year. That was one thing I was advocating for in form of Tyler Anderson, was that was a guy who had given basically, 150 to 180 innings, it felt like, every single year. Syndergaard, when you get 2 through 5 in the Dodgers rotation, it's a bunch of guys that you're just crossing your fingers that you can get 25 starts out of, basically. And so Syndergaard is in that mold. But again, if he gives you some reasonable production during the time that he's in there, I think that's a move that people end up being happy with. And again, it's the theme that I mentioned. It's believing in the player development system of the Dodgers and engaging with it that regard. And so let me shift to this question, and I think this is one that a lot of people are asking, and I'm curious to get some thoughts from the chat here, because we are going to get to that, is do the Dodgers need to keep making moves, Matt? Like we talked about Martinez, we talked about Syndergaard, we talked about Justin Turner being gone. Do the Dodgers need another bat? Do the Dodgers need another arm? Let's start on the offensive side, right? We could go around the diamond real quick. You've got Will Smith and Austin Barnes behind the plate. You've got Freddie Freeman at first base. You've got some combination of Miguel Vargas and Max Muncy at second and third. You've got Gavin Lux at short, J.D. Martinez at designated hitter. You've got Mookie in right field. Let's say Chris Taylor in center field, and then James Outman and or Trace Thompson in left field. That's kind of the offense right now. That's the defense. You got Michael Busch kind of hanging around, probably potentially a bench bat, Yanni or whoever the guy is they just traded for, who I definitely don't think is going to be on this roster in about a week or so. But when you look at that group, do the Dodgers need another bat?
I think so. And I think, the reports so far have been that they're in the market for a center fielder. And you brought up a great point. I don't know if it was yesterday or in one of the other videos, that as much as, that center field looks to be like the biggest hole, if you find a very good left fielder that is available, do that, because Chris Taylor and Trace Thompson can play center field. James Outman can play center field if necessary. It's not like the Dodgers only have, guys who can play, like a Joey Gallo type thing, who unfortunately for our guy Blake, Gallo has moved on.
Yeah, speaking of that contract, by the way, what did he get? $11 million? I
think so, yeah. More than J.D. Martinez.
That's freaking insane.
Yeah.
Anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt
Scott Boras. That's Scott Boras for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think they need an outfielder, basically, is I think the easiest way to sum it up. And if you find that the best player available, like I said, is a left fielder, then you go that route. If you can find a good option in center field, then you go and get him, and you plug in the pieces the rest of the way.
Yeah, I guess when I think about this question, sort of the thing that jumps to my mind is like, what's the measuring stick? Like when we say, do they need another bat, compared to who? What's the team that you're comparing it to? I was going back and forth with some folks on Twitter because I posted the lineup. I said, look, this is a really good lineup. And somebody posts like these 8 teams that have better position player groupings than the Dodgers. And I just don't think it's the case. I think if we are comparing it to what we are used to as Dodgers fans, then of course they do need another bat. But if you're comparing it to other teams in the league or even other teams in the division, then I would argue it's a pretty compelling group. And so like I just looked at I'll explain how I broke this down. But when I look at, I grouped hitters, and I'll do the same with our pitchers here in a moment, into 4 groups. It's kind of like the first group are studs, all-star type players. The second group is who are the guys that you're reasonably confident will perform for you. The third group is like, there's some reasons for optimism, there's some reasons for pessimism. They're kind of in the middle. And then the fourth group is hey, we're just wishful thinking, hoping for the best here. If you look at the Dodgers, I would say they have 3 guys in the studs category. That's Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Will Smith. I think you pencil those guys in as being elite at their positions and giving you offensive production as they have over the past couple of years. This is where it probably gets a little bit dicey. I would put 3 guys in the I'm confident in them category. I would put J.D. Martinez, Max Muncy, and Gavin Lux in that category. Now, I recognize some people are going to disagree with me. I'm banking on a bounce back from Max Muncy because last season was the outlier for Max Muncy. And I just think Gavin Lux, as much as whatever people want to say about his defense, he was a really solid 20. I think he had like a weighted runs created of 120 or something when he went down with an injury last year. He was a really good offensive player. So I've got 3 in that. And then the last category is kind of the lots of questions. Category number 3, reasons for optimism, reason for pessimism. Chris Taylor is in this category. And then I would put Miguel Vargas in this category. Again, some people might say that's too high, but the hit tool on Miguel Vargas all throughout the minors has been elite. It doesn't mean it's going to translate right away, but there's reasons for optimism and reasons for pessimism. That leaves just one starter, whether it's Outman or Thompson or Bush, in sort of the just purely optimistic rose-colored glasses kind of grouping there. And so I'm looking at that lineup. Now I'm looking at the comments. People hate on the Gavin Lux comps. They don't like Chris Taylor. When it says Taylor, come on. I don't know if that means he's too high or too low on my list. I suppose it could go either way. But that's how I have my group. Now, I'll let you go. I don't think we're going to disagree on Betts, Freeman, and Smith as the studs. JD, Muncy, and Lux are in the second category. Am I too high on Muncy and Lux in your estimation?
No, I think that's fair. The only thing I'll push back on with Lux is if he is going to be the shortstop and if there is any sort of trouble there, whether it's fielding or throwing errors, my concern is how will he handle kind of those struggles and that pressure of, okay, now you're the shortstop after it was, Corey Seager, Trey Turner, and now it's you. That would be my only concern. Other than that, I think it's certainly reasonable to put him in that group with those guys.
Yeah, and look, I'm projecting on Lux there. This is still a guy who's just turned 25 years old, so there's a little bit of projection of he had about a 750 OPS last year, and I'm projecting for him to be able to build off of that. I do think your point about shortstop, second base, whether he's in his own head defensively, could impact that. But just to compare, like one of the teams that I got told on Twitter, and now Twitter's the worst place to go for advice, was that the Giants had a better position grouping than the Dodgers. I've been told by multiple people the Dodgers are going to finish third or fourth in the division, okay? Let me just give you the Giants breakdown. The Dodgers have 3 studs. The Giants have 1 stud. That's Carlos Correa. He's really freaking good. He's not as good as Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman, by the way, so he's probably third, maybe fourth, depending on how I'm feeling about Will Smith that day. But he's third on that list, okay? They've got one guy in the list of dudes that I would probably feel confident in. That's Jock Peterson. And look, we all know Jock Peterson well. That tells you where I'm going. J.D. Davis, the only other guy on the projected lineup for the Giants who had an on-base percentage last season over 325 or a slugging percentage over 400. So that just gives you context for the Dodgers lineup. I know what it looks like compared to last year's team, but compared to other teams around the league, this is still a top, at worst, 7 lineup in all of baseball. I think you could make an argument it's closer to top 5.
I think the only thing with that is it can rank that highly if everything sort of or at least the majority of players sort of pan out. If Max Muncy bounces back, if JD Martinez hits to his potential, if Gavin Lux does his part, if maybe even Chris Taylor bounces back a little bit. And that's kind of my biggest concern, and what I've alluded to in some of the other videos is, fine, the Dodgers are going to go with this sort of youth movement, and I understand they have talented prospects who need their opportunities, but for a team that has World Series aspirations, you kind of are putting yourself in a box where, 4 or 5 things need to absolutely go right for you to kind of end up in that position. I just think that's a risky place to be.
Yeah, and I agree. And by the way, to the comment, the reason I'm not comparing the Dodgers to the Padres is because I think the Padres are better. I think the Padres have arguably the best lineup in all of Major League Baseball. And so I'm not the guy up here trying to say this is the best lineup of all time. I think the Padres are better than the Dodgers offensively as currently constructed. I'm just saying, just because this isn't the 2022 Dodgers, and just because this isn't the 2023 Padres, doesn't mean this group sucks and is trash and we're tanking and all this commentary I hear. Because, again, it's still one of the 7 best lineups in all of Major League Baseball, I would say. And I agree with you that there is a little bit of a youth movement, but I would push back a little. I feel like some of that has become overblown because when I go through that list, Betts, Freeman, Smith, J.D. Martinez, Max Muncy, Gavin Lux, Chris Taylor, 7 of the 9 starters that I just mentioned are not young guys. I mean, Gavin Lux, if you want to say that. So 7 of the 9 are not oh man, we're just praying that these guys figure it out. Now 8 is Miguel Vargas, who's one of the top prospects in all of baseball, a guy who got a taste last year. And then number 9, I think 8 and 9 are the 2 that I think there's a little bit of projecting going on. But again, at some point, you've got to let these guys play. And Miguel Vargas is you can have as much confidence in him offensively as it feels like any Dodgers offensive prospect that they have brought up in the last handful of years, going back to the Corey Seagers of the world. And so I agree with you that there is a little bit of a youth movement. I would say 2 things. One is, this is how the Dodgers historically have done things. They are the kings of the Rookie of the Year award, and that happens when young guys play. And I also think it's a little bit overblown because I think every lineup typically has holes. Like, would you feel better if Cody Bellinger was in place here over one of these other? He's a name brand, but he's worse than all of these guys, you know? Like, Chris Taylor last year was really, really bad. And so I think we're comparing it to an unrealistic standard when we say that this group sucks, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I won't go so. I know I've been sort of skeptical and critical of how things are looking. I won't sit here and say that the lineup sucks, and I don't think that fans should really feel that way either. And just I got ahead of myself when I am looking at the quote unquote youth movement. I'm definitely applying that to the pitching staff as well. Which
totally.
I know we're getting to.
Look at that. Look at that segue, Matt. Let's get to that. Do the Dodgers need another arm? Primarily, we're talking in the rotation. Obviously, they've made some moves in the bullpen as well. JP Feyereisen, another guy that they added. He will be out for half, if not 2/3 of this upcoming season, but very, very good last year. But looking at the rotation, you've got Urias, Kershaw, May, Gonsolin, and Syndergaard as the 5. You've got Pepio, Miller, Stone, Grove, Jackson, etc. kind of waiting in the wings. In your estimation, do the Dodgers need another starting pitcher as well?
Definitely. And I mean, my preference would be that it was more of a very good number 2 or a number 3 starter. I don't see that happening at this point. I think it's going to be more of a depth move, which still would be welcome because, like I said, kind of similar with the lineup and position player side, the Dodgers, one, I think the starting rotation it's going to be more susceptible to not change, but things happening, injuries, I guess, if you will. Like we've discussed, Clayton Kershaw has his back trouble, which unfortunately probably is going to come up at some point in the season and cost him 2 or 3 weeks on the IL. Dustin May is heading into his first full season back from Tommy John surgery, so we don't necessarily know how conservative the Dodgers may be with his innings.
Yeah.
You hope that Tony Gonsolin can recover from kind of the elbow forearm issues that he had at the end of this year. And also on top of that, kind of maybe not necessarily match the same level of production he had, but pitched. This was the first time he really pitched that well. And so is he going to be somebody who is that talented, or is it going to be a little bit of regressing to what we saw in the years before that? And so, and then after them, it's like a lot of youth and experience. And, Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone are definitely guys who can come up and contribute, but that's realistically probably not more of, middle of the season type thing. And so for the time being, I think you need another starter. And I'm seeing some of the comments that fans are picking up, like Seth Lugo does look to be the kind of main target right now.
Get fired up, Seth Lugo, baby.
Yeah, the latest report is he's likely deciding between the Dodgers and Padres, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, again, I know people are going to think in the comments that I'm some guy that's drinking the Kool-Aid over here, but I look at the rotation, I would say 2 things. Again, I'll use the same categories. I think the Dodgers have 2 studs in Julio and Kershaw, and we can say what we want about Kershaw's health, and it's a real thing, and it's something to be concerned about. When the guy pitches, he's elite. He's still elite. He's one of the best pitchers in all of Major League Baseball last year when he did pitch. And so obviously, his health history puts him in jeopardy of whether he belongs in this category, but I think if you can get 22-ish starts out of Kershaw at the level that he was at last year, I think he's a stud. Then you've got May and Gonsolin, these guys are fantastic when they are healthy, but that's a big caveat to put in because both of these guys, I've joked, if you get 50 starts combined from May and Gonsolin, I think it's going to be like a home run, 10 out of 10, unbelievable success for the Dodgers. And then 5th is Syndergaard, who, again, I said, he's probably a number 3.5, 4 starter on most teams. He's the 5th starter here. But the reason I would say no to needing another arm is because, youth movement, if we want to go down that road, they have guys that can make those starts. I think Ryan Pepio has gotten his feet wet. I don't really know how to evaluate his last year. He struggled with control, which we knew was going to be his issue, but the stuff is there. Hopefully he gets an offseason to work in. He feels a little bit more confident. He's a year older. You like the optimism there. Michael Grove, I thought, was pretty good in some showings. Andre Jackson's not really a guy. I think if he was... The fact that we saw him more in 2021 than we did in 2022, probably not a positive sign. But then you guys got guys like Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone, who have the highest ceiling of any of this group. Now, those guys haven't really pitched a ton in the upper levels of the minors yet, so maybe not opening day ready. But if you told me between Pepio, Miller, Stone, and Grove, between those 4 guys, that you were going to need 20 to 25 starts this year, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't feel terrible about it. Again, I think Pepio is probably if he had to go out there and pitch a bunch of games, he's probably a 4.5, 4.7 ERA guy, which If he gives you 5 innings and 2 or 3 earned runs, like that's going to be fine for this team. All the while you're getting experience, all the while you're figuring out maybe one of those guys pops off and one of them isn't a 4.5 ERA type guy, but it's the next Dustin May, it's the next Julio Urias, the next Clayton Kershaw, and all of a sudden you feel a lot better about things moving forward. And so, I think obviously would I like if they go sign another pitcher that upgrades? Sure. Would I like if they sign another bat like in center field or left field? Absolutely. But I actually think like the question marks that they have so many bites at the apple, if you will, that it's not like we have one guy for this one spot, and if James Outman turns out sucking, we're all screwed. It's like, no, the Dodgers are going to be screwed if Miguel Vargas sucks, if Trace Thompson sucks, and if James Outman sucks, and if Chris Taylor sucks. If all 4 of those guys suck, then yes, we're in trouble. If 1.5 of those guys turns out to be fine, we'll be okay. On the starting pitching side, like, you have 10 bites at the apple. Like, can I patch together 5 or 6 good ones? I think I can. So I just, honestly, I'm not trying to be overly optimistic, drink the Kool-Aid guy, but I just think that the overreaction is disappointment about how the season ended with the Padres, dumped gasoline on seeing what the Padres are doing this offseason, comparing it to one of the greatest teams in baseball history, regular season-wise, of last year, and it's like people are panicking, again, as if this is a team that is not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. I do agree with you that, it's the way the offseason has gone where the year the Dodgers have decided to kind of show some restraint is the same time the Padres have made the big splash, the Giants have made a big move, the Mets have made big moves. Like, that's definitely shaping, I think, perspective and adding to maybe some of the angst that fans may be feeling. And I hear you. I agree that, the Dodgers are in a position where they have a lot of opportunities for, like, they're not just relying on the one player or the one pitcher. But again, my concern is you kind of need multiple pitchers, multiple position players, things to sort of break in your favor for the season, for the roster, however you want to look at it, to really kind of pan out. And I've followed this team too many times where, like I referenced this trade deadline, they don't need a starting pitcher because they have X, Y, and Z. And literally anything that could go wrong pretty much did. And that's happened in years past too. And there's only so much you can do to prevent it. I mean, obviously injuries, you could be the deepest team and still absorb a ton of injuries, which we've seen the Dodgers go through. But that's still kind of my biggest concern is you need, Gonsolin to pitch well and stay healthy. You need May to be healthy and pitch well. And those are your top end guys. And if they're not, like, I don't necessarily see a Michael Grove like being your Tony Gonsolin or Dustin May this upcoming season. And if he is, then hey, I will tip my cap and say Michael Grove took that step forward. Ryan Pepio developed, benefited from experience he gained. But that's just where my concern sort of resonates. And I don't necessarily think I'm panicking. I know you're not accusing me of panicking. I'm personally, like I will say, like I'm not panicking about it, but I think there's reason to be a little concerned.
Let me ask you this. As constructed, if you had to just guess, how many games do you think, like what's a conservative estimate for number of games that this team wins?
I think 90.
Okay, so 90 wins for the Dodgers this season. I'm looking up last year's win totals. Do you know how many teams in the National League won more than 90 games last year?
Ooh, I think it's 2 or 3. I think
2.
The Braves, and then didn't the Mets get up there?
Yes. So
3 total. Well, 3 total, right? With the
yes,
Dodgers.
Correct. Yeah. What the heck is? Oh, that got it. I'm sorry. I'm looking at this wrong. Let me rephrase that question. There were 4 teams that won 90 games. Popped up the wild card standing. So the Dodgers won 111, the Braves won 101, Mets 101, Cardinals 93, Padres 189, Phillies 187. So let's just hypothetically, I think 90 is pretty conservative. This team's probably in the 90 to 93-ish range. Let's just call it there. What if the roadmap for this 2023 group is to start out the season as constructed on pace for 92 wins? While you're doing that, you're going to figure out, is Miguel Vargas ready for this? Yes or no? Is James Outman, is the swing retooling honestly making him a better hitting prospect than many had penciled? penciled him in to be? Yes or no? Is Trace Thompson, was 2022 a fluke? Yes or no? Chris Taylor, was 2022 a fluke? Yes or no? You're answering all these questions. Can Ryan Pepio take a step forward? Where's Bobby Miller at? Where's Gavin Stone at? Like, you're answering these questions because these guys are getting actual chances at a major league level to figure it out. And guess what? If you're on pace for 92-ish wins, you get to July, and then you have answers to those questions. And you look down and you say, you know what? Miguel Vargas, he's another year away. He's hitting 210. He's struggling. The defense isn't that great. You know what? Gavin Lux, defensively at shortstop, it's a nightmare. You know what? James Outman, he's actually really good defensively, and he's hitting 260 with 15 home runs. We'll take that. We don't need a center fielder anymore. And you know what? Gavin Stone's actually the guy. He popped, and we've thrown him some major league starts, and he's got 5 starts and a 2.9 ERA, and we think he's good. Because what you have is, now we know. Now we know those things, and guess what? Then you go out and make trades. And if you're worried about the luxury tax, now you're only taking on a third of the salary, and you're taking it on, though, at the most important time of the year, which is right before the playoffs. Like, I actually think this roster is built for a plan like that makes a ton of sense on paper and for the long term, because you get answers about some of these prospects that if you just try and plug in surefire things at every position, you never figure out if you have the next Corey Seager or the next Will Smith or the next whoever.
That's fair. And I think at this point, that is, the path worth heading down. For me, though, I probably would have, and again, some of this is twofold, because not at the contracts that some of the shortstops ended up getting, that DeGrom got, that even Verlander got, but had the Dodgers, taken maybe a little bit more of a sure bet now, I think there's value in doing that as opposed to sort of, playing a waiting game with so many different pieces. If it was just one or two, I would be with you.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot more, that's where my concern comes from. And I saw a comment, I think it was Anna who said just be at 500 at the trade deadline.
We're hoping for better than that, Anna.
I hope if the Dodgers are 500 at the trade deadline, there's going to be some serious problems.
Matt's going to have a Castaway style beard. There's going to be gray all throughout it. He's just going to be a grumpy old man over on the other side. But it'll be interesting. That's the path. That's the path forward. And again, I'll say this one more time. People are probably sick. Major League Baseball, the playoffs do not reward the best team. The Dodgers just had arguably the greatest regular season in the last 50 years, and it didn't matter. They played the Padres in the NLDS, and they lost. And so, if you're the Dodgers, I'm not saying who cares about the regular season. I'm just saying, if you want to go the route that I just described, that's fine. Because then you can plug your holes, and you already know what your holes are, rather than sort of guessing now and saying, shoot, well, we were really counting on Gavin Lux being our shortstop, and now we can't, and we've already traded everything. So, we'll see. I did love one other comment in the chat said, when I was talking hypotheticals, of course, I said that James Outman was going to be awesome. It was Vargas might suck and this guy might suck, but Outman, it's there's maybe a little bit of subconscious stuff going on in there. Let me ask you 2 more questions. I said this before. It's our last show of 2022. Next Sunday will be Christmas Day. The Sunday after that will be New Year's Day. I will be watching tons of football and tons of basketball on Christmas Day. I will be watching the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. Unfortunately, neither of our teams will be playing in that game, but that's a conversation for another day. But as we look back on 2022 and look ahead to 2023, I wanted to ask this question. How will you remember 2022, Matt? And we'll do some bold predictions and stuff like that. But just in hindsight, kind of just off the top of the head, I didn't give you a ton of notice that we're going to be talking about this, and I'd love to hear people in the chat's thoughts as well. But how will you remember 2022?
I think is the season that could have been. It's sort of the last hurrah with the way free agency has gone. And, I know over the past few years, little by little, we've seen, Corey Seager leave, Kenley Jansen leave. But now that it's also, Clayton Kershaw's back, but again, Justin Turner was one of the longest tenured players. And so now he's gone. And just the number of players from when the run really started, right? When they finally got to the World Series in 2017, guys from that group are pretty much gone. And, when you looked at the roster at the beginning of the season, it had, I think all of us, not necessarily expecting them to win a World Series from the standpoint that it was a given, but it had the potential, right? And so, it was kind of a disappointing year because of, those opportunities don't come around very often.
Yeah. It's funny. I'll put this one up. Do M. Sal says 2022 best team doesn't always win the World Series, and that's kind of where I land. again, if you watch this show, you're not going to be surprised by this. I always try and remember how amazing this team was in 2022. Like, reality is, it was the greatest team in franchise history. We know the Dodgers have one of the most storied franchise histories out there. And so for it to, it's not like we're sitting here saying, hey, this is the greatest season in Padres history. It's like, well, cool. Nobody cares. This is the greatest season, regular season, in franchise history for a franchise that has unbelievable books written about it. And so I think I need to remember that. And that's, I will always try to remember it. That said, what I'm going to remember most is that they didn't win. And 10 years from now, as a guy with bad memory, when someone says, hey, what do you remember about the 2022 Dodgers? I'll be like, let's see, 2020 they won it. And yeah, they didn't win in 2022. And that's kind of all that matters. And that's kind of unfortunate because I really do think it was a special season. There were special things that happened. Obviously, like you said, Justin Turner is gone. Cody Bellinger is gone. Some of those guys that just sort of felt like they embodied this era of Dodger baseball are gone. And so I want to remember the regular season successes, but ultimately it's impossible not to say that the thing we're going to remember most was, as Axel says, the year they didn't win was for 2022. So with that, let's look ahead and ask the follow-up question, which is, how are you feeling about 2023? We've kind of danced around the subject. Maybe we haven't danced around it. You said you're not panicking, but like, what do you think? I mean, and you can project here. Like, do you think there's a blockbuster trade coming? Is Corbin Burns or Tim Anderson, is somebody of that magnitude on the way before the season starts? Like, are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Have you resigned yourself to second in the NL West in a wild card berth? Where are you at?
I will give Andrew Friedman the benefit of the doubt and say, like, if he were to pull off a noteworthy trade, if you want to call it blockbuster or not, but just significant, however you want to describe it, it wouldn't fully shock me because he has done it time and time again. And I've been on here and said, look, when you expect him to do one thing, he does the other, and it still is a very good move. So that potential is still there, but for the time being, kind of in this moment, I'm concerned about next season, and I've sort of said it tongue in cheek that the Dodgers are tanking in 2023 because they're avoiding.
It's your fault. People are saying that, Matt. I'm blaming you for that language being used to describe the Dodgers.
So I think it's fair to say this is the Dodgers' version of doing it. Of, hey, we're gonna limit spending and stay below luxury tax. And
but tanking implies you are losing on purpose.
I know. It's their version of it. So it's not full, like, literal tanking that you're used to seeing with different teams. But there's some concern, but I do see ways that the team can be in a much better position come October than where it is right now.
Yeah. It's sort of a mix of what I see in the chat, and thanks again for those joining us live via YouTube or via Facebook, and we appreciate you listening to this after the fact, either on YouTube or via podcast. But it's kind of a mix. On one hand, I understand the disappointment and the frustration that Dodger fans have, because I would have loved to have Xander Bogaerts on this team. I would have been perfectly happy if Trey Turner had re-signed. I had even started talking myself into Dansby Swanson. I thought there was an outside chance at an Aaron Judge move or maybe a Justin Verlander move. And so for that to be no, I understand the disappointment and frustration. I understand the disappointment in seeing that the Dodgers are like middle of the pack in offseason spending this year. I think that was before the Syndergaard and J.D. Martinez, so we might be closer to the top third now. But the payroll is not going to be what it was. I mean, the Mets, the Padres, these are teams that have blown through it. So I understand the frustration and all that. And I understand that, look, like I'm the one sitting here resigning myself saying, if you ask me today, are the Dodgers going to win the NL West? I don't know. Like, I am as unconfident in saying yes to that question as I have been. I'd be curious, maybe when you start talking next, I'll look up. I don't know if they have NL West odds up for 2023 yet, but I would imagine that the Padres are favorite and that the Dodgers might even get you a little bit of plus money. So all that said, as other folks have said in the chat, I'm kind of excited because this feels a little bit like an old school Dodgers team where you've got some young guys. We keep talking about, I love thinking about the prospects and how the Dodgers have one of the best farm systems in baseball. I'm excited. Like, you and I might be going to spring training. I like spring training because I like seeing the James Outmans of the world. I like seeing the Miguel Vargases of the world, the Pepios and the Groves of the world, because those are usually the only times you ever get to see those guys. Then they go away to Oklahoma City or to Tulsa, and that's that. And so I'm excited that there's a little bit of youth, that there's a little bit of sort of people counting them out people looking down on the Dodgers and saying, this team isn't any good. I'm excited about that. It's just a different vibe, and there's a little bit of newness and excitement for me.
Yeah, sorry, I was reading some of the comments. We're getting McCourt era. We're getting underdogs.
McCourt era, look, you could say whatever you want to say. The Dodgers' payroll is still really, really high. It's just not quite as high as you're used to.
Yeah, I mean, again, and that's why I said, when I say this is the Dodgers tanking, it very much is tongue-in-cheek because they, 90 wins is what, if they win, I think 90 wins was my low projection for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it, I've said it. The postseason there's nothing guaranteed. I still would rather have as many established, all-star players as possible on the roster because I think it gives you a better chance in theory. But even the Dodgers had that this year and nothing happened. And so, maybe Miguel Vargas is the spark for them. Maybe James Outman is, a breakout year, similar to what we saw with Bellinger when he unexpectedly came up because of Adrian Gonzalez getting injured and he played his way into staying at the major league level. So, there's still, like I said, time for the roster to improve, and Andrew Friedman can't be fully ruled out. Yeah.
I can't find any odds. The last ones they had were from December 12th, so obviously a ton has happened since there. The Dodgers were still the National League favorites, by the way, at plus 330. The Padres, Braves, and Mets were tied at plus 475. Again, those numbers have since changed, but yeah. So I don't know. I think this season will be fun. I think it will be interesting. I think it will be unique. And it'll be different. No Justin Turner, no Cody Bellinger. Some of those faces that you're just so used to seeing. We had seen the Kenley Jansens of the world kind of move on, but Justin Turner feels like a different echelon. Like it feels like the next guy to go will be Clayton Kershaw. That feels like, man, it's going to be very different when Clayton Kershaw isn't a Dodger. The flip side is you have these overlapping eras with Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman who are going to be here for the next 5 and 8 years respectively. And so interesting stuff there. Well, we've got a few more minutes. Let's get to some questions here. If you've got questions, throw those in the chat. One thing we can talk about real quick, because I know we had some people commenting on it earlier, is there was a minor league move that the Dodgers made yesterday. Bradley Zimmer signed by the Dodgers. Don't look at his 2022 offensive statistics if you want to be excited about things here. 2022, his weighted runs created plus was 26. So that means he was 74% worse than average. That was in 117 plate appearances. He had a strikeout rate of 38.5, a walk rate of 4.3. He hit 124 with a 229 slugging percentage. There's really nothing positive to say. The couple of years before that, he was in the 87 to 89, so about 10% below average. This is a guy who's a former first-round pick, former top 15-ish prospect in all of baseball. Does play good defense. So if you're looking for a guy who's a defensive center fielder, Bradley Zimmer could be your guy. But minor league contract, I don't know. It's just this is a Kevin Pillar type flyer. We'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's a minor league deal, so it is what it is. If he turns things around, if the Dodgers hitting coaches can help him, maybe correct some things, then great. If not, it was just a minor league signing.
Yeah. Dave asked this, and Dave, I'll say this. We're going to do a video at some point this week kind of looking back on the Justin Turner quote-unquote era, if you will. But I know, Matt, this JT was your guy. Do you have a favorite and or a first memory of Justin Turner that comes to mind?
I mean, the first one, honestly, would just have to be at some point in the 24, like him, not a specific one, but just remembering him in like clutch situations coming up with the hit the Dodgers needed, whether it was a single they needed or a double or whatever the case was. He very early on into his Dodgers career showed a knack of being able to do that. Favorite memory? I mean, I think the easy one is obviously his walk-off home run against the Cubs in the NLCS, and partly because it came on the anniversary of Gibson hitting his in the '88 World Series. But there was also, I mean,
it wasn't him coming out without a mask, testing positive in the middle of Game 6 of the World Series.
No, not that. The diving play in the World Series, that double play that he turned. I mean, there's a ton, and I think we'll take a little bit more time to sort of look back on the different ones and get them covered in that video.
Yep, agreed. Jaime asks, who's playing third for the Dodgers? Miguel Vargas, Max Muncy, who you got at third?
I think it'll be Muncy. I think Vargas will end up more at second base.
Yeah, I tend to agree as well. I think there's some rotating, but Vargas has been taking some balls at second, and Muncy was fine at third. So they probably just feel a little bit better about the guy standing next to Gavin Lux. It's also worth mentioning that with no more shift, you're going to need a lot more from your second baseman from a range perspective. And, while I would say Max Muncy is maybe deceptively quick, I'll leave it at that. Jason asks, are we going all in on Ohtani?
I mean, that seems to be the narrative, right? And that's why they're avoiding the luxury tax for 2023. I'm not fully sold that Andrew Friedman will get into any sort of bidding war. He typically hasn't. And another thing to consider is Julio Urias is going to be a free agent next year as well. So you need to not be careful, but be mindful of, you want to put in 90% of the chips for Ohtani, but save a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, if you go under this year, you can put all the chips in on both guys.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
hey, you just got to reset it once, then you get a few years to screw around, right?
True.
THP asks, big predictions for how the young prospects play this year. Says I can't use Outman. That's his one rule. I'll phrase the question this way, Matt. Outman, Vargas, Pepio, Grove, Miller, Stone. If you had to pick one of those guys that maybe you were most confident in making an impact this year, and one of those guys that maybe you're less high on than some other folks, who would you say you're higher on than average or lower on than average?
Oh, well, it's tough to say. I think I'll phrase it this way. I think Bobby Miller will make the biggest impact.
Okay.
And that could come in the form of he's up in September and he plays a huge role in October type thing. Not necessarily he's in the opening day rotation and pitching for the entire year. The one I'm maybe most concerned about or lowest on, I think, is probably... I'm torn because Vargas, I feel like I'll say Outman.
Okay.
Just because I'm not sure if the hitting tool will fully translate to the major league level. Vargas is a close second for me, only from the standpoint of what I sort of have issue with. If this was the Dodgers' plan going into the offseason, I'm sure they were already thinking about it. Why didn't Vargas get more opportunities during the year to play?
Yeah.
That way in 2023, he's not basically being thrown in, only 5 games under his belt or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would say the exact same thing about Outman. If this is the route we were going to go, why not give yourself a lot more of a sample size at the end of last year? I can't use Outman. I'll say this about Outman. I think he has, the defense will translate. I think he is going to be a good to very good defensive center fielder, and so I think the floor on him is maybe a little bit higher than some of these other guys because I'm not sure anybody else can really say that. Yeah, and I mean, I'll say Vargas. Everything I read about this guy, the prospect people all love him. They think the hit tool is going to translate. The confidence. I mean, I'll never forget. I think it was The Athletic that had the story, and he's in a 1-strike count, and he sees the guy stealing, and he just takes. And afterwards, the manager's like, "Hey, if you have a strike on you, you don't have to just take the pitch because somebody's stealing." And he basically said, "No, that guy didn't have anything that was going to strike me out, so we're good." That kind of confidence and swag, I think the Dodgers could use. So I'll say those two are guys that I like. As far as guys that I'm maybe down on, I guess I'll say with Miller and Stone, I'm skeptical about how quickly they can make an impact. I think both those guys are all-star break or later type. That's just a guess. If I had to pick, I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I would say. Let's see. Thunderpants wants to know, how many home runs do you think J.D. Martinez hits this season? Here are his numbers. 2017, 45, 18, 43, 19, 36. We'll skip 2020. 28 in 2021, and then just 16 in 2022. So give me a total for J.D. Martinez home runs in 2023.
I'll do 25.
Dang, you stole my number. I'm going to say 26. I'll take the over on Matt's 25. The Blurry wants to know, what's the goal for the 2023 Dodgers? Besides, let's win the World Series, right?
I mean, typically, but if I'll keep with my, like I said, tanking thing, and so at this point, it's just go finish above 500.
Oh my gosh! Matt forced somebody to take a clip of me saying Friedman has done nothing. Somebody cut the clip of him saying, "I hope the Dodgers finish above 500," and with the word tanking somewhere in there. Richard asks, did their remarkable regular season success contribute to their apparent complacency in the postseason? I'll answer this one first. That's an easy no for me. I think sometimes in baseball, you go through a rough patch. The Dodgers went through a rough patch at the wrong time. I refuse to believe that guys that lost in 2021 were complacent in the postseason in 2022, especially because a lot of those guys weren't even there for 2020 as well. So I don't think those two things are linked. I think in 2021, you could look at how hard they had to grind to get to where they got to and say that maybe cost them. But 2022, they coasted. They won the division by 20-something games. So I don't see any correlation between those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The only thing that I will say, and I've expressed this in the past, was I think they could have benefited from, maybe having a little bit more fire, whether it came from some of the players or Dave Robert. Things didn't always need to be so, even keeled, because at some point, you are in the playoffs and it is sort of do or die. So let's see, at least publicly, a little more urgency.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to some questions. Brandon wants to know, will the Dodgers make the playoffs? I would bet lots and lots of money on it.
Are we counting the wild card series as the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Baseball's counting it. We're counting it.
Yeah, I mean, they make the playoffs. And I'm joking. I still see them as being able to contend within the division, obviously. I don't think the Padres are going to run away with the NL West.
Fernando asked, do you still think we can get Brian Reynolds? He was part of my offseason plan. All of our offseason plans have been utterly disastrous, as expected. There's so many possible outcomes. You wanted to re-sign Justin Turner. I wanted to sign Bogarts. Daniel wanted to trade for Corbin Burns, which I suppose that's still in play. I mentioned trading for Brian Reynolds. You talked earlier about going and getting an outfielder. Reynolds defensively seems to be a better fit in left field than in center field. Would you be a fan of going out and getting Brian Reynolds?
Depends on the costs, and I have a feeling it's going to be high. I mean, he has multiple years of being under team control, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't think the Pirates are just going to give him away, and so what it may take, I don't know if it would be worth it. And again, my biggest concern is in center field. He did not have a good year, and so if that's who you're relying on to play center field, then there might be something that needs to be corrected, and I don't know if the Dodgers would necessarily be able to.
Okay, here's a great question. Matt loves this question. Terry wants to know, who's going to be the closer in 2023, Matt?
I'll go with Evan Phillips.
Oh, I thought you were going to give me no closer. We're done with the traditional view.
I mean, I think that's likely, but Evan Phillips will get the majority of the save opportunities still. Yeah,
I think that's a safe bet. I think Daniel Hudson kind of I shouldn't say that. I think it's reasonable that Phillips might be the fireman, and maybe a Daniel Hudson type or a Yency Almonte type could be. But I do think, to your point, I think it's going to be a committee type approach. I think they've got lefties like Alex Vesia that you like back there. They've got righties like Almonte and Phillips that you like back there. Feyereisen, whenever he gets there, was 21 and a third shutout innings last year, so he's very, very good as well. So I think they've got a mix of some guys, and who knows what they get out of Shelby Miller. We won't go there. That might infuriate the chat a little bit. Let's see if we can get one or two more questions here. Jaime wants to know, do you think there's one more big trade in play for the Dodgers this offseason? Do you think the Dodgers make a trade that nets them somebody who starts on opening day or starts the season in the rotation?
I'll go with yes. I think Andrew Friedman has got something in the works.
Yeah, I agree as well. Ken Rosenthal said they're looking at center fielders and that some of the young guys there. I definitely think that a trade for a center fielder is definitely within play. All right, let's see. And anything I'm missing, Matt?
If you want to do a quick one, there was one asking about the rotation from Brian, just recently, a minute ago. Okay. It's basically, you don't need to necessarily, if you can't find it. It's no particular order: Julio Urias, Tony Gonsolin, Clayton Kershaw, Dustin May, Noah Syndergaard at this point in some order. Yeah. Yep. Agreed. And then we'll end with this. Video for Newt wants to know, not sure if this was asked, is the Trevor Bauer fiasco making Friedman hesitate in signing a high AAV salary starting pitcher this offseason? What do you think will happen there? I'll just say this. I don't think that Trevor Bauer has scared them away from signing off high AAV pitchers. I think that the Trevor Bauer connection is the Dodgers don't know how far below, or if they even are below, the tax line at the moment, because if Bauer's suspension gets revoked and he wins his appeal, then all of a sudden there's 30 or 40 million bucks on the books for next season. So I think that's the Bauer connection. Now, as to do we think the appeal will win?
it sure as heck seems like nobody has a clue. If I was forced to choose, I would guess that he does not win his appeal, but I mean, the fact that it's still ongoing makes me nervous. I'm not saying we should read into that one way or the other, but I think the appeal started in like May or something. Like, it feels like this appeal's been happening for like 5 or 6 months. And so the fact that there's no ruling, and it doesn't feel like we necessarily know when there will be a ruling either. It's just kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, I don't think there's any sense for when the ruling will come down, how it'll, whose favor will end up going in. And I think another thing worth noting is, if I understand it correctly, there is 2022 salary that's also at play as well. So the Dodgers could end up owing this year plus potentially next year. And so it could just completely sort of cook their books.
Got it. Your girl Cassie wants to know, do you think Belly gets a standing ovation when he comes back to Dodger Stadium? I say unequivocally yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think Turner.
I mean, Kenley got a warm reception, right?
He did until he got booed when he came in to close the game, which, I mean, frankly, I was okay with, and I don't remember if that was the popular opinion or not, because I felt like at that point you've already welcomed him back, and now at this point, if you're a fan of the Dodgers and he's coming in to close a game against the team you're rooting for, like, it is okay to boo him. Yeah,
absolutely. Michael wants to know, Jeff, are you doing any more Lakers Nation chats? I am. Friday night, December 23rd. Pencil me in. I'll be there watching the Lakers. You know what? To be honest, I got asked to do tonight's show. Had to give him the old no. DodgerHeads takes precedence. Lakers up 5. 3:47 left in the game. Go Lakers. Marv says I should sell life insurance. I'm going to take that as a compliment. I sold minor league hockey tickets for a little while. So there we go. But yes, I agree, Bellinger. My point was, if Jansen gets a standing ovation, I think he was far more of a question mark than Bellinger, than Turner, than a lot of these other guys. So absolutely. Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us. Matt, 2022, it's been a great year. The Dodgers didn't win the World Series, but I do want to say I'm always appreciative, that I cover a team that is as good and as competitive as the Dodgers, that they're as interesting as the Dodgers. I've joked, I don't know how somebody would do this show if they were like a Diamondbacks or a Rockies fan. That would be a brutal existence. You're going to all the games when they're at home. I can only imagine what that is like 81 times a year for a team that's going to lose 55 to 60% of those games. I also appreciate how much this show has grown. We've got 250 people watching right now on December, whatever, 17th it is, 18th. So that's remarkable. So we appreciate you. Our show keeps growing. Our subscription base keeps growing. We partnered with Blue Wire Podcast Network this year. We got to do some shows live from their studio in Las Vegas. You and I might be headed to spring training this year. Tons of exciting stuff. So I'm super grateful for all of that. We appreciate all you guys for hopping along. Please spread the word. Let your friends know. Subscribe. Ring the notification bell. Rate, review, follow, wherever you get your podcasts, all that kind of stuff. Matt, anything you want to say as we close out the year and before we head into 2023?
No, I mean, just echo what you said. We appreciate everybody's support throughout the season and in the off season, whether it's, spring training, before spring training, and now here we are in December talking about, things not necessarily going great for the Dodgers, and we still have a lively chat and everybody commenting and watching, and we can't express enough how grateful we are for all you guys, and we look forward to continuing to provide content.
Yeah, so there still will be videos throughout the next couple of weeks, just to be clear. We just won't be doing the long, hour-long live show. Obviously, if there's some crazy breaking news and a Brian Reynolds or Corbin Burns or Tim Anderson trade happens, you can bet we'll figure out some way to get some content up here with a few of us breaking it down. But thank you all for joining us. Thanks for those that are listening to this after the fact, either on YouTube or on Blue Wire. Check out DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 on social media. Follow Matt at mmoreno1015. You can follow me at Jeff Spiegel as well. Enjoy the rest of your night or day whenever you're listening to this. And of course, as always, go Dodgers.